Hello, hello. Welcome to At Home with the Intuitive Cook, the podcast giving a voice to everyday home cooks like you and me. Join me around the kitchen table as we chat about finding cooking ease and inspiration beyond rules and recipes and the noise of celebrity chef culture. It's not rocket science, it's just dinner. Hello, hello. This is At Home with the Intuitive Cook, and I'm your host, Katerina. My guest at the kitchen table today is Michelle Williams. Michelle is joining me from the south of England, where she's a coach and end-of-life doula, and someone who loves travel and food as much as I do. She also has an inspiring story to tell about the healing power of nutrition. Let's dive in. Hi, Michelle. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
I know you're kind of someone who cooks regularly now, but has it always been that way?
No. I think the love of food came from a relationship I was in my early 20s. They were a bit of a foodie and introduced me to the world of food and cooking, and I've kind of carried that on from there, I think. Introduced me to combining different flavours and, going out for dinner or cooking something indoors was a real thing in our relationship. So I think that's where it's come from. I wouldn't say early memories or childhood memories of food are the best. So definitely later on.
Do you have an early memory of food you'd like to share?
I thought about this actually earlier. The two things that are springing to mind are a plate of boiled mince, baked beans and mashed potato. Not the tastiest of combinations. And the mince wasn't flavoured with anything. It was just boiled mince, a can of beans and mash. In all fairness, my mum used to do a lot of baking. I guess in an attempt to make things healthy, she substituted some things in her baking. The one that springs to mind most is the wholemeal shortbread. I think wholemeal flour doesn't belong in shortbread, full stop. I mean, I don't make shortbread, but I don't think wholemeal flour belongs. And I think that then probably was the reason I made my way around the rest of the cake tin or the biscuit box to make up for what I hadn't had out of the wholemeal shortbread. I think the sugar fix or whatever it was I was looking for didn't happen. So I used to make my way around the rest of the baking, whether it was flapjack, cookie or whatever. But they're my earlier memories of cooking. But I think, my parents separated when I was about 9. So single mum, working mum, she was still teaching at the time. So, I'm imagining things like the boiled mince, baked beans and mash on the plate was cheap, easy, not too much faffing, just was quite tasteless. That's all. That isn't something I'd put together myself.
Yeah, well, I guess, the tastelessness isn't inherent in the boiled mince and mash combination. It's maybe that I think you get that with British cooking or people with, a British background. There isn't that background of using so much herbs and spices, and it's the other cultures that came to Britain later that kind of brought that with them. And so you can certainly make mince and mash, make it very tasty, but obviously you need that sort of background and knowledge to even come up with the idea, I suppose, that you could throw some spices in.
Yeah. Having done a bit of travel, it is interesting to see how all these other countries, they do bring all these flavours into things. And like you say, typical British cooking doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. And it's the flavours coming from those other influences, I think. Spent some time in Albania, and it was interesting to see they had a bit of their own cuisine, but they also had influences from Italy and some of the Greek as well. So they sort of had they didn't know who they wanted to be. They had a bit of everything. Again, everything had flavour.
Yeah, which is very interesting when you see how in Britain the sort of kind of internationally influenced cooking has, taken off so much now.
Hugely. Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely.
Maybe there was a craving there.
Yeah.
So
A need for it.
Amazing. I didn't even know you'd spent some time in Albania. I did know that you are a big fan of Italy and Italian food.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's why I fell in love with Italy. I went on a music tour as I was in my last sort of year at school. I used to play clarinet in the orchestra and band, and we joined forces with another school. We went on a 2-week tour. We'd spent some time around Lake Garda, and then we went towards Venice. The first experience I remember was trying to get my head around having pasta for starter, having a square of lasagna on my plate and then being fed more food afterwards. It's like, I can't get this concept. But we played one evening somewhere and they fed us afterwards. I don't know what was in this tomato pasta sauce. Trying to deduce things from sort of experimenting myself. I want to say it was possibly mascarpone or something of that, because it wasn't just tomato. There was a creaminess about it. I wouldn't say it was a mozzarella in there. I feel the consistency. It must have been something like mascarpone, or maybe ricotta. But this just stayed with me. The tastiest bowl of pasta I've ever had. So queuing lots of experimenting here and then to try to replicate that taste. But also that was a reason to want to return to Italy several years later. I need to go back and explore more food. There was less need for trying every flavour of gelato as I did at 16. But it was each place I went to in Italy, I wanted to have something of the local cuisine, the real local stuff. And yeah, Tuscany particularly is an amazing part of Italy for food.
It's amazing how that bowl of pasta is still so fresh in your mind, even though you just said you were 16 back then, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing how food memories really stay with us. And was it, you said then you went, you returned home and were experimenting to replicate that. So was it how you got into cooking?
I guess having then been in that relationship and interested in cooking, I was then prepared probably to start experimenting, and I would, I might have bought a tomato and mascarpone soup and thought, oh, there's that bit of creaminess. Is it that? And so then let's make a bowl of tomato pasta and put that in it. Try it with something else. And I've always gone back to it being potentially mascarpone. I could be completely wrong, but it was fun trying to find out what that was. But in other recipes, I used to do a chicken kind of bake, which again had tomato in it and mascarpone through the sauce in that and basil. And I was, is this it? Is this it? Is this what I had before? But it's never quite been the same, but it's been fun trying. I don't think we can do it quite as well as the Italians though, if I'm honest.
Yes, and I think there is also, I think food memories are also connected to the whole situation. It's not just the food. It's also, being 16 and traveling in a new country and taking in all these experiences and probably feeling quite grown up for doing that and all that. I think all these things kind of are enmeshed in our food memories as well. So you can't quite replicate the dish because you can't replicate the memory.
Yeah. I mean, the night before I arrived in Rome, when I'd gone back to Italy, it was quite a particularly special night that night. And I went to this pizzeria and chose a carbonara. And this carbonara was absolutely out of this world. And I've labelled it the best carbonara I've ever had. But like you just said, how much of that may be down to what I was experiencing at the time and what I was going through. And could I go somewhere else on a different occasion and have the best carbonara I've ever had? Because it's a different experience going on at the time. So that's quite interesting to look at it that way.
I remember a long time ago, I traveled quite a bit on the wild island of Madagascar. So sort of traveling around there for 3 months. And we were doing all sorts of crazy stuff, taking sort of overland trucks that were stuffed with people, children, goats, sacks of this and that, and sort of, traveling across the landscape. And it was quite a long, I think it was like a 3-day trip going across the south of the island from the sort of west to the east or the other way around, can't remember. And one of those evenings where, the truck would stop somewhere and then you would continue the journey the next day. We ate in, I don't know, in a little hut it was like a restaurant, but they were selling food, but it was like a little dark hut, and it was the simplest of the simplest. And as far as I remember, it was rice with a tiny bit of something, and they offered us salt to put on the rice. And I don't know what it was about this salt. This salt was, as you said, out of this world. Just putting the salt on the plain rice was just the most incredible thing. So I don't know if it was something special about the salt or whether it was all this experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I remember that salt on the plain rice just making it all kind of go to a different level.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be just the smallest, simplest of ingredients.
So you were telling me how you got into cooking in your 20s. So do you remember like a light bulb moment or something you realized about cooking?
I think it was just that someone had shown me there was more to food than what I was experiencing. That there was just so much more to it. And I think you've touched on it with what you were saying just now about experiences. I was in a new relationship. It was a good relationship at the time. And it was something that we shared together. And it was something that I learned from that person. And, that brought us together in many different experiences, whether it was in the home or whether it was out. And I think that just sort of opened my eyes and broadened my horizons. I think I'd always had one view from my family and my growing up. And it just gave me a wider perspective, I guess, and what else was possible.
Exactly. Understanding food as so much more than just, filling your belly because you need to eat. And of course, sharing food is so important in all relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship or a family relationship or even, friendship. I mean, sharing food is brings us humans together. So I know that in my relationships, food has always played a really important role too.
Yeah, I think it kind of gives a foundation and then you can sort of expand from there, can't you? Like what we're doing now, that food's the thing that's brought us together, but it's going to open the doors to other things too. And I think that's what's nice about it.
Yeah. I guess this is now some time ago. So how is your relationship with cooking now? How has it changed or has it expanded from there? Or what kind of cook are you now?
Still growing in confidence with a bit more experimenting and trusting myself. I've always tended to follow a recipe if it's like a specific dish. I'm confident with putting different flavours together. I might not feel I need a recipe for that because I've maybe used a recipe in the past and then gone, oh, well, those two flavours work together. So I'm going to put that in a bowl with several other things. But it's very much about nutrition for me now as well, but still getting enjoyment and satisfaction out of it. I struggle to understand people we've all got our own opinions and I'm accepting of that. But I do struggle with the idea that some people say, oh, if I could just have what I need in my diet in just a pill and just take that and I'd be happy with that. Don't have to worry about food. So, all those flavours and those textures, what happened to them? I wouldn't enjoy that. I love food too much for that. But I have been on a bit of a health journey and have really learned I've really seen how the impact of good food and good nutrition can have on the body. To some extent, I'm still working on it and working through some health stuff at the moment, but I've really seen how it can heal the body. And that's been quite eye-opening for me. And with those changes I've made over the last 2.5, 3 years and see where I'm at now, I've recently done a gut reset. It's the same kind of program I went through 3 years ago. And the ease in which I sailed through this gut reset, because it's become this way of eating more cleanly and paying attention to what I'm putting into my body and is it actually going to nourish me, has just become a way of life. So it's been that much easier this time around. I always cooked my own food, but I was still processed food off the supermarket shelf and a jar of sauce. And there isn't any of that anymore. And I've just kind of sailed through these 3 weeks recently. And it's been really positive to see how much I've made those changes. So I guess it's changed to some extent. It's more focused around not just enjoyment and pleasure and not considering what impact certain things will have on my body, but taking that into account as well, but still wanting tasty food because I still want to enjoy that experience.
And you have found that you can change your diet towards eating, better, more healthily without losing the pleasure. Have you?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I absolutely love just making a bowl up of some kind of grain, sometimes some plant protein, whether that's chickpea or beans or lentils, different types of colourful veggies, then adding some herbs, maybe adding some spice, adding nuts, seeds, dressings. Yeah, that's one of my favourite types of food, whether it's some kind of Asian or Oriental type flavours going on, or whether it's more Mediterranean. I love eating that way. I just think it's about what you can add to your plate. Focus on what you can add for that diversity to be feeding all the gut microbiome, all those diverse. It's not hard. You can, instead of buying a can of beans, one type of bean, buy a can of mixed beans and you've ticked off 5 different varieties. Same with a bag of salad leaves, or buy a thing of mixed tomatoes, mixed coloured tomatoes or mixed peppers. It's just little tricks like that can then just boost your health. Yeah, it works for me, and it's stayed tasty for me.
Yeah, and I like what you said, to focus on adding the good stuff, adding nutrition, adding color, adding variety, rather than focusing on all the things you shouldn't be eating, to just keep eating the good stuff. And when you eat more of the good stuff, you'll automatically eat less of the processed stuff, just because it's just automatic, really.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll dip my toe back in, and it's like, actually, that's not doing anything for me. My taste buds have changed. When you're eating cleanly, it helps to manage that hunger. I don't really find that I need to snack during the day. I don't snack between meals. Yeah, and that's not because I'm made a conscious effort not to specifically do that. It's just because the change in the way I'm eating, the change in my diet, I just don't have that need. So yeah, it's been a learning curve, but it's also been nice recently to reflect back and see how far I've come and know that it's had a positive impact on my body. I didn't have a menstrual cycle, and through the changes I made, I've managed to bring that back, which has been quite astounding, really, to see that the body can heal itself that way.
This is quite astounding, isn't it? And as you said, if you nourish yourself, then that constant hunger goes away because your body is getting what it needs. So it really makes sense. And of course, when you nourish yourself, your body also has all the ingredients, all the molecules to heal itself, because the body has that tendency towards healing. It has this amazing ways it repairs itself all the time. But if the onslaught is more than it can manage, then you can't heal. So that's really amazing to hear. What kind of impact it had on your health just by doing, from what you say, really some, simple changes. It's not that you suddenly gone on some all out crazy strict diet or anything. You've just been swapping out kind of less nourishing for more nourishing foods.
Yeah. I mean, I used to walk down a supermarket aisle, the wrong ones. And if there was a new, it might have been a biscuit, it might have been a cake, it might have, whatever it was. But, that's a new flavor. I need to try that. But that's fine. But when they bring out 10 new ones, it's like, that's a bit much for my body to handle. And I just want to try all these different things. Now I want to try different things, but they're good for me. And I don't walk down those aisles anymore. Or sometimes I might walk down them and go, look what you don't do anymore. Isn't that amazing? And there's no desire to want to do that because I know how it feels when I do it, and it doesn't feel so good. But it's been a journey. And I think all the information is out there. Some of it can be very confusing. I've been lucky to have some help along the way, and some support. And I've done a lot of my own learning. So I've got lots of knowledge, but sometimes we can hear this information, but it's just not the right time to receive it. It wasn't the right time 10 years ago. It wasn't the right time 5 years ago. But I came back from Italy 3 years ago now, and I was just ready to give my body a break. I'd done a long walk and I needed a break from pasta and pastry. And that was what prompted me, because it had been a lot of pasta and pastry, but I justified that with what I was walking. So I came back, and that was my motivation at that point to do that. And I haven't looked back, really. There's still some healing going on, but again, I'm approaching it from a natural process rather than taking medication if I can help it, because I believe, having already seen the evidence that the body can heal itself, I'm maintaining that approach where I can.
Yeah, well, makes sense once you realize the power of your own body. Yeah. So you did just talk about bowl food. So what is another favorite thing to eat of the things you eat these days? You have mentioned in the past an Italian dish to me.
Oh, I have. I was thinking, shall I mention that or not? I could talk about this dish forever. It is my absolute favourite. It's a bowl of bean pasta, and it's got cannellini beans and borlotti beans in it, some smoked pancetta and rosemary and chili flakes. And that's it, with some stock. And you then put the pasta in about, depending on how you like your pasta, about 10 minutes before the end. And with the pasta cooking in the stock in that way and in the bean juice, it just gives the pasta a completely different texture to when it's just been boiled in water and then added to a dish. And it's just the most comforting bowl of food. The rosemary, it's the chili, the heat of the chili, just that thing that rosemary does. I find it with anything, rosemary. And then I think the pancetta, because I have tried it without the pancetta as well. It can be omitted for vegetarian. Just feels like there's something missing. It would be nice to find an alternative smoky thing that might work that's not the pancetta. Maybe I need to experiment with that. But yeah, and it's just the beans and it's the pasta. It's the texture of the pasta and that warmth from the chili. It just works. It just works. And give me that at the weekend and a glass of bread and I'm fine. It just works.
It sounds amazing. And I still, I've heard you talk about this before, but I still haven't tried it. But I'm having sort of 2 weeks of being on my own in the house coming up. So having a bowl of something that I can eat over a couple of days sounds just like the right time to maybe try this. So I will.
Yeah, because you could you can cook up all the beans and then you can perhaps separate them into a couple of portions and then just cook each portion with your pasta in when you're ready to have it. And I sometimes, again, it's what I can add. So I sometimes might stir some spinach through it at the end, or some chopped up kale or cavolo nero, just to give some greens in there. If there's no greens in it, I do tend to serve it with a rocket and avocado salad with balsamic and olive oil, maybe, just because I like to have a bit of green with my food.
And now, my kitchen friends, it's time for a quick break to see what I've been cooking up for you. If you ever feel trapped by recipes or wish you could get more creative in your kitchen, I made a free mini course. It's called Ditch the Recipes, and it's a short series of 5 emails that will help you get started on your intuitive cooking journey. Sign up on the website at theintuitivecook.co.uk/free or find the link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to our conversation.
One of the latest things that I'm enjoying, one of the latest things is I'm leaning more towards having a savoury breakfast where possible. I find, and this is something I've learned from the glucose goddess and through my own journey with my health. But I actually find my body responds better to having a savoury breakfast and ensuring there's enough protein in it. So eggs are a great thing for me. But one of her recipe suggestions was tuna on hummus served with avocado and rocket and then lemon juice, oil and seeds. And I've not had tuna and hummus before, and I'm not a massive tin tuna fan either. So I'd steered away from tuna for a long time and gave this recipe a go. Loved the different textures. So you've got the creaminess of the hummus. You've then got the texture of the tuna. You've got the crunchy seeds, and then you've got the oil and the vinegar, and it works. It works. So it's become a bit of a go-to when I've been playing with it, adding harissa or what I have on the side of it, and making it more of a dinner if I want it to be a dinner. But I've identified a tin of tuna that's also a game changer. It's not the cheapest tuna, but it rekindled my relationship with tuna. It's just so delicious. I think it's a white tuna, but if you've got a good quality tuna, that's a really nice dish. It's simple, but it packs a punch with all the protein and the flavour and the different textures. It really works. And I've even done it with a piece of tuna steak now, because making more of a meal of it, and there's something about the tuna and the hummus works together. So simple, but tasty.
Oh, I
It's
love
not
that
going to beat
too.
the bean pasta, but yeah, give that one a
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, because I think I probably come from the same direction as you. I'm not a huge fan of tuna, and the concept of tuna and hummus again kind of isn't necessarily the first thing I would think about. But, now that you spoke about it so enthusiastically, I'm kind of really curious to try.
I'm definitely enthusiastic about it. On tuna, I wasn't a fan of tuna steak until I went and bought some from the fishmonger the other day. And what a different flavour versus tuna steak out of a packet from the supermarket, because I've always felt it doesn't taste of much, and I cook it, whatever I flavour it with, I haven't overly enjoyed it. A whole different ball game from the fishmonger. So, of course, anytime I want fish now, off I go to the fishmonger first thing in the morning. It's so different. And it's just, reinforce that shop local where you can. And, whether it's the farm shop or the greengrocers or whatever, if you could do that, just a different flavour altogether. And because I've been doing this gut reset, it's been important because I've only been largely eating fish. So I've wanted to enjoy my fish. So I've become a regular at the fishmonger.
And that is another great thing about local shops, isn't it? That it's obviously the food is much better, because I think local shops, whether it's a fishmonger or the butcher or the greengrocer, by definition, their supply lines are kind of away from mass production, because all the mass produced stuff, whether it's salad or tuna, goes to the supermarket. So when you step into a local shop, you just immediately have access to a different supply line that is more likely to be better, just because smaller is better, in the age of everything being mass produced. Yes, it is more expensive, but it's just so much better. I kind of generally eat meat that I have raised myself, including chicken. But the problem with that is that it's been a chicken that has been several years old. So it's, you have to slow cook it. That's the only way. So, and no way I'm eating a supermarket chicken. So then suddenly it's like, okay, but if I want a roast chicken, I'll really have to go looking somewhere. So I found these chickens that, they're pasture-fed, organic, and from regenerative farming and all that, and you can order directly from the farm. And again, as you say with a fish, the difference in the taste is just, it's out of this world.
100%.
It is 4 times more expensive. It is very expensive, but when you have paid so much money to get a piece of something that so much care has been in, I bloody make sure to use every single bit of the chicken, at the very end when there is nothing left on the carcass. I'm still pulling bits of meat off the chicken. So, the two of us have 4 or 5 meals out of this one chicken. Plus, I have frozen the bones, so the chicken broth is coming up. And then if you look at it that way, it's only a little bit more expensive. It's not that much more expensive anymore. So
I was just going to say, even like going to the fishmonger, I think 2 or 3 times last week, I said, "Oh, can I have salmon fillet, please?" So just for one, I said yes. And he gave me a piece. I walked out and I thought, well, that's going to do 2 people. So yes, it was slightly more expensive, but it was also very generous. And actually was going to be 2 dinners. And that was the same with my tuna steak. Like, I don't need to eat all of that in one meal. So cut that in half of it in the freezer or half for someone else. It's like, actually, I've ended up with probably the same amount I would have got for 2 meals in the supermarket. But I do know it's going to taste better. So yeah, because I eat a lot of plant-based food as well. That's where I'm not spending out perhaps on meat. So it's not as expensive. So I don't mind paying for the good quality fish and the good quality egg for where I am having animal products.
And I think this is also maybe a more traditional way of eating that, the meat or the fish was not something that people would eat every day or 3 times a day even. The way I know people have grown up going back 50 years, that is the kind of meals you would have on the weekend and then maybe the leftovers going into the week. But, you wouldn't have a roast dinner every day. Of course not. But you would have that on a Sunday. So, and the rest of the time, you'll probably just eat plant-based anyway, with bits and pieces thrown in. I find that very helpful to try and imagine what would be, the way people ate before. Processed foods took over. And this is often also a really kind of practical way to orient yourself towards what is healthy and what isn't healthy. Just think about what people would have done when you couldn't just walk into a supermarket and buy all this packaged stuff.
And that also links into something else funnily enough, it's been on a couple of podcasts recently, and I've then looked into it a little bit myself because of my own health healing journey. But the concept of fasting, that also is, how it was back then. Food wasn't available all the time. And so people would feast and then it would be famine. And I just think that's nicely kind of linked with what you were just explaining then about it wouldn't be meat all the time. Actually, what else would they have had? When in the absence of that, it would be plant-based. And I think the same can be said for this fasting as well. It's, we just have instant gratification with a lot of things, and food being one of them. And our body's not having a chance to just break down what was put into it several hours ago before we've put something else into it. And we're not designed that way. That's not how we're built. But that's a whole other thing. But I found that sort of supportive of my journey too. What's nice is I've been learning recently how there are people out there who don't have a one size approach fits all, and looking particularly at how fasting can be, how it works for women. There's been up until now very much a generic approach for everybody, but actually with women's hormones the way they are, there needs to be a different approach or it will have a negative impact on their health. And so that's been quite interesting to sort of see that. It is something I've dabbled in a little bit before, but just for health benefits really. But it's been interesting to learn how, linking it back to how we've eaten in the past, but also how it's specific to women's health, and also women's health in relation to the cycle of the moon. It's fascinating. I find it all really fascinating, and I could talk for hours. Yeah.
And it's also, fascinating in a kind of scary way how we're losing our connection with all that wisdom of our body and all this traditional wisdom. I mean, people did not come up with the idea that, for example, the moon is influencing what happens on the earth and also what happens in our body. This has been observed for centuries and millennia, and only because people observed it has it become something that, entered traditional wisdom. It's not something that, has been pulled out of thin air. We wouldn't know about this, and there wouldn't have been these traditions talking about that if it wasn't something that was observable and repeatable, and people knew about it. And we have this idea that we have to prove things by science, but actually what science is doing a lot of the time is that it's proving what people have known for millennia already. Science is catching up with tradition. Olive oil is one of my kind of favorite examples on this. This whole thing, is olive oil healthy? Is it not healthy? Should you be cooking with it? Should you not be cooking with it? Is it dangerous to cook with olive oil? And then you look at the Mediterranean cultures who have been using olive oil for everything, including cooking, for millennia. And people around the Mediterranean are arguably amongst the healthiest in the world. And now we have science showing that indeed, it's not about the smoking point that makes an oil develop dangerous chemicals. It's a completely different process that makes oil unhealthy. And olive oil is actually one of the best oils to be heating to, normal temperatures. But again, traditional cooking, you wouldn't have an industrial deep fryer in any kind of traditional cooking. And even if you deep fried something at home, because it is so messy and so complicated, you wouldn't do it every day. So it's not a problem to have some fried food now and then. But if you have fried food all the time, well, you wouldn't do that at home. But then we go and get it from the chip shop every single day or whatever, several times a week or every lunchtime. And that, again, that is not something that our body ever evolved with.
No. You've just made me laugh there. I have got an image now of being out in the wild with some deep fat fryer. It's just not how it's ever been. Yeah.
So what would be some of you had this whole journey for yourself with your health and with your cooking and the way you change your eating. So what would be a couple of practical tips you would want to share about making cooking easier, more flavorful, healthier?
I think I mentioned one of them. It's thinking, what can I add? What can I add? Whether it's a sprinkling of seeds, a bit of chopped up fresh herbs that's knocking about in the fridge. What can you add? I think the pouches of ready-made grains and lentils and things are convenient and are really great for easy meals, quicker dinners or lunches. I think they're a good base for bringing in that plant variety, but also giving you that base and to bulk things out. Adding those types of things to a soup can increase the nutritional value of the soup. You might have a tomato and something soup. Add in some quinoa to that. You've made that more of a meal of that. Add in a bit of protein, plant protein to it. And I think a lot of people still get caught up on calorie content, fat, and worrying about things like that. But actually, not all food is equal. Yes, you look at a fatty donut and you look at a fatty avocado, but what are the nutritional benefits of each? Is what I'm putting in going to nourish me? That's kind of a question I work from. I don't know if they're really tips, but they've helped me.
Oh, they're wonderful. They're wonderful tips. Yeah. Why is that not a good tip? So that's about adding nourishment. How do you add flavor? What are your tips on that? Because you're big on flavor and enjoyment of your meals too.
I quite enjoy adding, even if it's just a bit of harissa spice to something. If I've got something that's a bit Moroccan, or I'm having some stuff with hummus, or I've made one of my salad bowls, adding some harissa or something into an olive oil dressing, adding things like fermented food. I might stir some sauerkraut through something because, again, good for the gut, but you've got a bit of different flavour in there. Or kimchi, if I'm doing something oriental. Things like miso paste, I think is a good one. Tahini is good in dressings for adding a different creaminess and flavour. Herbs, like, I said earlier, rosemary just transforms that pasta dish. Without the rosemary, it just wouldn't be the same. Adding basil into a salad, fresh basil leaves, or squeeze of lemon. It doesn't have to be big. I might drizzle something on something big, or it's still missing something. But again, there's a big thing around salt, and I know you've talked about this. I've always been frightened to add salt to my cooking. I'm not eating lots of processed food that's laden with salt. So I can have some salt in a dish I've prepared, and it does transform it. It doesn't have to be much, but it just makes a big difference.
I think the thing about salt is that it enhances the flavor of what is in your pot or on your plate already. So if that is full of flavor already, just that little bit of salt is making a massive difference. If something is without a lot of flavor, like all this processed food stuff that needs the flavoring and the salt to taste of anything whatsoever, or it would on its own, it just tastes like cardboard. So this is why processed food is so laden with salt, because there is nothing else to it. And I mean, the data clearly shows that, more than 60% of our daily salt consumption comes from processed foods. And very specifically, even from foods you would not even think they're salty, like breakfast cereals and bread. So it really doesn't come from adding salt to your cooking pot.
No. Yes.
So, yeah, wonderful. These were some really good tips, and was really fascinating to hear about your journey to health through food.
Thank you. It's been good to talk about it. And I hope, if it inspires anybody else, then that's a good thing.
Yes, exactly. It's always good to see someone who does it. And I think you just showed us how it really doesn't have to be difficult, only consistent, I guess, to go with what nourishes you.
Yeah. Yeah, consistency is key with it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending that hour with me, Michelle. That's great.
It's been really good. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of At Home with the Intuitive Cook. Check out the show notes for links and tasty morsels. And remember, fresh episodes are served up every other Friday. Subscribe to stay tuned and keep exploring the joys of everyday cooking. Until next time, stay curious, trust your taste, and don't forget, it's not rocket science, it's just dinner.